Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. We're continuing our reading of Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, okay? And he was digging in on contracts, covenants, and everything around that. Okay, so we're going to continue upon that vein, inshallah. Let's begin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The children are playing board games and hanging out. And so we shall do some reading. Let's begin. Bismillah. There be some that proceed us further, and will not have the law of nature to be those rules which conduce to the preservation of man's life on earth, but to the attaining of an eternal felicity after death, to which they think the breath of covenant may conduce, and consequently be just and reasonable. Such are they that think it a work of merit to kill or depose or rebel against the sovereign power constituted over them by their own consent. So some people rather think of the joy in the next realm, and they don't really think of preserving their life in here and to endure living under a tyrant. So they think it's a great work to get rid of an oppressor. But because there is no natural knowledge of man's estate after death, much less of the reward that is then to be given to breach of faith, but only a belief grounded upon other men's saying that they know it supernaturally, or that they know those that knew them, that knew others, that knew it supernaturally, breach of faith cannot be called a precept of reason or nature. Others that allow for a law of nature the keeping of faith do nevertheless make exception of a certain persons, as heretics, and such as used not to perform their covenant to others. And this is also against reason. For if any fault of a man be sufficient to discharge our covenant made, the same ought in reason to have been sufficient to have hindered the making of it. Okay, so to discharge it versus what halts and hinders the execution of the covenant made. The names of just and unjust, when they are attributed to men, signify one thing, and when they are attributed to actions another. When they are attributed to men, they signify conformity. Okay. So just and unjust, signifying something to action. When it's put upon men, so we're gonna write here conformity. An inconformity of manners to reason. But when they are attributed to actions, they signify conformity or inconformity to reason, not of manners or manner of life, but of particular actions. A just man, therefore, is he that taketh all the care he can, that his actions may all be just, and an unjust man is he that neglecteth it. Okay, there's another way to word this. Exercising all options. So, because he says here, taketh all the care he can, that his actions may be all just. So, taking care to be just. And such men are more often in our language stilled by names of righteous and unrighteous than just and unjust, though the meaning be the same. Therefore, a righteous man does not lose that title by one or a few unjust actions. So that's an interesting way to look at it. A righteous person doesn't lose their title because they've made a few mistakes. They proceeded from sudden passion on mistake of things. Exactly. Yeah, so you could be a just person, do pretty good in your life, and then you have this burp, this sort of buckle mistake that happened in your life. As he does on forbears to do for fear, because his will is not framed by the justice. So, wills being framed by justice. Wills being framed by justice. So, think about your will, and you have parameters. For us Muslims, we have the Sharia, right? Quran and Sunnah. That's the frame by which our will is to navigate, because then we know halal and haram. Okay? We're on the straight path. There's guardrails there. But by the apparent benefit of what his will... Oh, I see. But by the apparent benefit of what he is to do, that which gives to humane actions the relish of justice, is a certain nobleness or gallantness of courage. Nobleness, gallantry, rarely found, by which a man scorns to be beholding for the contentment of his life to fraud or breach of promise. This just of the manners is that which is meant, where justice is called a virtue, and injustice vice. So justice being called a virtue, injustice is a vice. But the justice of actions denominates men, not just gallantry, and the injustice of the same, which is also called injury, gives them but the name of guilty. Again, the injustice of manners, and then the disposition or aptitude to do injury, and is injustice before it proceeded to act, and without supposing any individual person injured. But the injustice of an action, that is to say injury, supposes an individual person injured, namely him to whom the covenant was made. So injury here. Injustice of manners. That's a unique turn of phrase. Namely him to whom the covenant was made. And therefore, many times, the injury is received by one man, when the damage redoundeth to another. As when the master commandeth his servant to give money to a stranger, if it be not done, the injury is done to the master, whom he had before covenanted to obey. But the damage redoundeth to the stranger. That's a good, cool example. So, redounded, to whom he had no obligation, and therefore could not injure him. And so also in commonwealth, private men may remit to one another their debts, but not robberies or other violences, whereby they are endamaged, because the detaining of debt is an injury to themselves, but robbery and violence are injuries to the persons of the commonwealth. So, commonwealth manners. How you are to behave. So, debt. He mentions debt. So, in Islam, you forgive, you loan someone money, interest-free. You forgive a portion of that debt, you've done a great deed. But, if that person, in order to relieve themselves of their debt, they go about robbing and pillaging, slanging drugs, well, you're injuring everyone in the commonwealth. You're not doing a good thing. Your debt hurts only you. You must have good manners to the commonwealth, he's arguing, and not go about harming others in order to raise funds in order to free yourself from the debt. Whatsoever is done to a man conformable to his own will signifies to the doer is no injury to him. For if he that doeth hath not passed away his original right to do what he please, by some antecedent covenant, there is no breach of covenant, and therefore no injury done to him. And if he have, then his will to have it done being signified, is a release of that covenant, and so again there is no injury done to him. Justice of actions is by writers divided into commutative and distributive, and the former that say consisteth in proportion arithmetical. So commutative, distributed justice of actions. How justice of actions are commutative and how they are distributive. The latter in proportion geometrical. Commutative, therefore, they place in the equality of value of things contracted for, and distributive, the distribution of equal benefit to men of equal merit. Equal benefit to men of equal merit. That's a new way of looking at equality, isn't it? As if it were injustice. Pardon me. Alhamdulillah. As if it were injustice to sell dearer than we buy, or to give more to a man than he merits. The value of things contracted for is measured by the appetite of the contractors. And therefore, the just value is that which they be contented to give, and merit besides that which is by covenant, where the performance on the one part meriteth the performance on the other. It falls under justice commutative. Justice commutative. So we were on the right track. Justice of actions. How it's divided and distributed. Not distributive. Justice commutative, not distributive. Is not due by justice, but is rewarded of grace only, and therefore this distinction, in the sense wherein it useth to be expounded, is not right. To speak properly, commutative justice is the justice of a contractor. Okay, contractor. That is a performance of covenant in buying and selling, hiring and letting to hire, lending and borrowing, exchanging, bartering, and other acts of contract. Acts of contract. And, okay, wait, hold on. So we need to put here commutative justice. Okay, and distributive justice, the justice of an arbitrator. That is to say, the act of defining what is just. Ooh, that's a good point. Wherein, being trusted by them to make him arbitrator. I kind of forgot about that word. If he performs his trust, he is said to distribute to every man his own, and this is indeed just distribution. Okay, look, he is said to distribute every man his own, and that's how you are justly distributing. And may be called, though improperly, distributive justice, but more properly, equity. Oh. Diversity, equity, inclusion, Hobbes. What's wrong with you? Which also is a law of nature, as shall be shewn in due place. As justice dependeth on antecedent covenant, so does gratitude depend on antecedent grace, that is to say, antecedent free gift, and it is the fourth law of nature, which may be conceived in this form, that a man which receiveth benefit from another mere grace, that a man which, I'm going to change some of the English, that a man which receives benefit from another due to mere grace, endeavor that he which gives it have no reasonable cause to repent him of his good will. For no man giveth but with intention of good to himself. Ooh. I mean, that's true, but we also should do things for the sake of Allah. Because gift is voluntary. That's true. Yeah, that's true, it is. And of all voluntary acts, the object is to every man his own good, of which, if men see, they shall be frustrated. there will be no beginning of benevolence or trust, nor consensually of mutual help, nor of reconciliation of one man to another, and therefore they are to remain still in the condition of war, which is contrary to the first and fundamental law of nature, which commandeth men to seek peace. To seek peace. So, recall, condition of war. Seeking peace. The breach of this law is called ingratitude, and hath the same relation to grace, that injustice hath the obligation by covenant. Pardon me. A fifth law of nature is complacence. That is to say, that every man strive to accommodate himself to the rest. For understanding whereof, we may consider that there is in men's aptness to society a diversity of nature, rising from the diversity of affections. Diversity of affections. Diversity of affections. Not unlike to that we see in stones brought together for building an edifice. For as that stone which, by the asperity of irregularity of figure, takes more room from others than itself fills, and for the hardness cannot be easily made plain, and thereby hindereth the building, it is by the builders cast away as unprofitable and troublesome. Oh, hey, hold on, this is a very cool example. The builders cast away as unprofitable and troublesome. So also a man by that asperity of nature will strive to retain those things which to himself are superfluous, and to others necessary, and for the stubbornness of his passions cannot be corrected is to be left. For the stubbornness of his passions he cannot be corrected is to be left or cast out of society as cumbersome thereto. Yes, so, okay, cool. So, that's a fascinating one. You can't fit in with society. Okay, so what he gets at here, this is a very unique example. So, pardon me. A builder goes and gets stones. Let's break down his example here, his analogy. And some stones you're like, okay, this is work, this one can't, it's not really going to work. It's not really something I can put in the material use of what I'm constructing. It's tossed out, right? It's unprofitable. Too much trouble. Now, we see he's contending that in society, there will be people who, they are stubborn and they're set in their passions. They can't be reformed. They can't be corrected. Okay? So you need to leave them. Okay? Cast them out of society. Exile. They're just too much trouble, very cumbersome, nothing you can do about it. Okay? You're trying to build society, right? Remember the hadiths that talk about kind of how like us Muslims were like a brick, the wall, like we're unified, we're like this to each other, this density, because you can build upon that, and it's harder to penetrate, right? You got a solid brick wall that's really well constructed. That's not easy. As like, here's this one. It's like there's a gap in here. If you're like into stonemasonry and architecture, I think you'll understand his point quite clearly. This is very interesting because a liberal thinks some people can always be reformed. Now, there is redemption, there is forgiveness for your sins, but you do have a debt to pay to society, right? And today, I argue we could have labor camps, forced labor camps, for those who can't be reformed. The good shouldn't be funding the food and shelter of the evil, Foreseeing every man not only by right, but also by necessity of nature, is supposed to endeavor all he can to obtain that which is necessary for his conservation. Oh, they're getting a little loud, sorry fam. He that shall oppose himself against it, for things superfluous, is guilty of war, that thereupon is follow, and therefore doth that which is contrary to the fundamental law of nature, which commandeth to seek peace. The observers of this law may be called sociable. The Latins call them commodere, the contrary, stubborn, insociable, forward, intractable. Okay, so hold on. Let's put a line through this. One change I would do to this text is that I got 1-inch margins, but what they should do is increase the size of the text. You know, it's very dense together, but I have to space this out. So notice here. Therefore doth that which contrary to the fundamental law of nature, which commands to seek peace, the observers of this law may be called sociable. The Latins call them commodere, the contrary, stubborn, insociable, proud, intractable. So the sociable. So you need to be sociable. And if you're not that, well, you're not doing the right thing. A sixth law of nature is this, that upon caution of the future time, a man ought to pardon the offenses past of them, that repenting desire it, for pardon is nothing but granting of peace. Okay, so that's it. Okay, so pardon is granting of peace. Okay? Which, though granted to them that persevere in their hostility, be not peace, but fear, yet not granted to them that give caution of the future time, is sign of an aversion to peace, and therefore contrary to the law of nature. So, aversion to peace, aversion to peace. The seventh is that in revenge, that is retribution of evil for evil. Ooh, that's a cool way to say what is revenge. What is revenge? It's retribution of evil for evil. Men look not at the greatness of the evil past, but the greatness of the good to follow. Okay, let's read that again. Men look not at the greatness of evil past, but the greatness of the good to follow. Whereby we are forbidden to inflict punishment with any other design than for correction of the offender. Oh, okay, so a punishment, punish for correction. Ooh. Now you're getting into some philosophical territory here, right? Do you punish only to correct? Do you punish to send a message? Do you punish in order to make them have an inflicted misery, to taste a little bit of their own medicine? You know, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Because some people, as he mentioned, then they cannot be corrected, right? Or direction of others. Yeah, exactly. So as a warning to others, a symbol to others, like, hey, you do this, this is what's going to happen to you. For this law is consequent to the next before it, that commandeth pardon upon security of the future time, besides revenge without respect to the example and profit to come, is a triumph, or glorying in the hurt of another, tending to no end, for the end is always somewhat to come. And glorying to no end is vainglory. Oh, okay, cool, that's a good point. Glorying to no end is vainglory. So, don't be vainglorious. And contrary to reason. So, if you're vainglorious, you're acting contrary to reason. And to hurt without reason tendeth to the introduction of war, which is against the law of nature, and is commonly styled by the name of cruelty. Tendeth to the, okay, so to hurt without reason is cruelty. Yeah, yes. So with Hobbes, he gives you two sentences, very finely formatted, right? The strings of reasoning, but you got to take those pieces and put them together and digest it. So, yeah, cruelty. What's cruelty? Okay, so cruelty. Alright. And because all signs of hatred or contempt provoke to fight. Alright. And because all signs of hatred or contempt provoke to fight. Insomuch. Okay, I'm gonna tell them to calm down a little bit and I'll be back. Okay, here we go. Alright. Now, for the end is always, Bismillah, something to come, and glorying to no end is vainglory, and contrary to reason, and to hurt without reason tendeth to the introduction of war, which is against the law of nature, and is commonly stilled by the name cruelty. So, you're cruel, you're gonna make people want to war against you. And because all signs of hatred or contempt provoke to fight. Okay, so hate, contempt, and hatred provoke people to fight. I think people can forget that. In so much as most men choose rather to hazard their life than not to be revenged, we may, in the 8th place, for the law of nature, set down this precept, that no man by deed, word, countenance, or gesture declare hatred or contempt of another. I mean, you can try not to hate, but there's people who should be hated. The breach of which law is commonly called contumely. The question who is the better man has no place in the condition of mere nature, where, as has been shown before, all men are equal. The inequality that now is has been introduced by the law of civil. So inequality was introduced by civil law? Well. I know that Aristotle, in his first book of Politics, for a foundation of his doctrine, maketh men by nature some sort of more worthy to command, meaning the wiser sort. Okay, now the next part. On this law dependeth another, that at the entrance into conditions of peace, no man require to reserve to himself any right, which he is not content should be reserved to every one of the rest. Oh, okay. So, that sounds a bit utilitarian, in a way, as it is necessary for all men that seek peace, to lay down certain rights of nature, that is to say, not to have liberties to do all they list. So it is necessary for man's life to retain some as right to govern their own bodies, enjoy air, water, it sounds very libertarian, very liberal. You a dirty liberal, Hobbes. You a classical liberal. This sounds very founding fathers-ish. Okay, so life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, govern their own bodies. What are you, some abortionist here? What are you talking about? Air, water, motion, ways to go from place to place, all things else without which a man cannot live, or not live well. And if in this case, at the making of peace, men require for themselves that which they would not have to be granted to others, they do contrary to the present law that commandeth the acknowledgement of nature equality, natural equality, and therefore also against the law of nature. The observers of this law are those who call modest, and breakers arrogant men. The Greeks call the violation of this law, if you wrote Greek, I can't read Greek, my guy, that is a desire of more than their share. A desire for more than their share. So, let's write also like founding fathers. The founding fathers did originate from Britain. Hobbes is from England, so maybe that's where they got it from. Leviathan. Also, if a man be trusted to judge between man and man, it is a precept of the law of nature that he deal equally between them. For without that, so you're equal before the law? Equal before the law. It is a precept of the law of nature that he deal equally between them. So not treating the poor different than the rich, we hope, but we know that happens. For without that, the controversies of men cannot be determined but by war. He, therefore, that is partial in judgment, doth what in him lies to deter men from the use of judges and arbitrators. So if you're biased, he's saying, you're going to make people not try to seek out the civil way of fixing disputes. You will push them to be more warring because they don't believe in the justice system. That's true. Justice system. Biases. You don't want to be impartial, To deter men from the use of judges and arbitrators, and consequently against the fundamental law of nature, is the cause of war. That's interesting. You could look at the crime rates in America and be like, gang warfare. Maybe that's what's causing a lot of the cartels, and mafias and gangs that get power because people want vigilante justice because they don't get it from the state. And we see the open, blatant corruption today. The liberals are very soft on crime. They release people on zero bonds. They've done terrible jobs. And then people say, well, we ain't getting no justice here. I remember a news story in Mexico where a child was R-worded. And the judges didn't do much because I guess there was some type of corruption where he got off. I don't remember the finer details. And when that individual was on the street, the community pummeled him to death and took his life. So that's a condition of war, right? They had the system failed them, so they took it into their own hands. And if you let everyone do that, now you've broken down civil society. And you're not being sociable. So what I'm getting at here with Hobbes thus far is that he wants people to know what makes people less sociable, what breaks down society, what laws of nature can we have that will make things better. So he explained things about contracts. If you break your contracts, people will go to war with each other. He's talking here about the law and how you gotta have really just a way of being impartial and truly judging in a fair and just manner, so that you don't become the cause of warring factions and the disturbance of peace and whatnot. It's very enlightening, I must say. He also mentioned cruelty, right? That if you hurt people without reason and you're cruel, well, that's going to push people to want to have it becoming a state of war as well. You're introducing war. And if you're vainglorious, you're doing something to no end, which is contrary to reason, you might end up doing things that are cruel because the end is not in sight. It's just for the sake of glory, and that'll also cause people to dislike you. Okay? He mentioned that revenge is retribution of evil for evil. And then he talked about to punish for the sake of correction, not just for the sake of cruelty. Which, and he mentioned acts of contract and gratitude, all sorts of things about equity, and then talked about distributive justice, justice of an arbitrator, communicative justice, performance of covenants, injustice of manners, justice of actions. It's very dense, but mentioning also of debt as well. Okay. MashaAllah. Hobbes has a lot to think about. Definitely somebody who's trying to figure out the puzzle to society. America isn't a commonwealth, but it's still interesting to see how this man thought so long ago. He wrote this. Look at the level of English, look at the level of thought, and look at some of the great writers today, or the people who do podcasts. The intelligence level is so low now. It really does kind of make you think that could the average high schooler understand this? You know, the level of English comprehension is really gone down. It's a really sad thing. So hopefully, you know, people gain benefit from this video. If you were to take a class on Hobbes, if they even offer it, and break this down, be a semester, and it would cost you a lot. But here we are doing it for free, line by line, breaking down the ideas. If you want to go on and study philosophy, write a paper about Hobbes, I believe that my videos that I'm making can greatly help in that. It's fascinating reading his ideas in a way, because we get to see another angle. And that's one thing that I love about philosophy, is you get to see what they're thinking about, and their level of intelligence was higher back then. We have all this technology, but it appears that much of the computers do the thinking for us. ChatGPT writing essays, you know, it has a devoid human intelligence to it, and it's just different. But you can feel his dedication to his ideas and how he's thought them out, you know. It's fascinating. And the fact that this book is available for cheap, you know, man, I don't even think politicians today could write like this, or anyone else, you know. Alright, I think the children their games are, they built a fort, they're playing, but the toddler is at war. She's not happy right now. She seems to be really probably trying to dominate her sister. She's feisty. She's a little pickle. I love her very much. And they're running around having a grand old time. But I gotta go be the peacemaker. Blessed are the peacemakers. You know how it is with kids. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and share. If you'd like to join my blog and read the other things that I write, refutations, we do some English grammar on there. I post hadiths on there, all kinds of stuff, memes, you know, if you like Lord of the Rings and whatnot. Other wonderful things, lots of motherhood stuff, motherhood motivation. I know it's hard for moms who may not have a support system, but having a boost in your motherhood journey can help, can definitely help. And I hope my blog does that. And so it's $5 a month, and that's like buying a cup of coffee, a latte, vanilla latte, pumpkin spice. And I think that's a great price for the content that you get. And it also, if you think of it, you're supporting me as like it's like a scholarship, because I literally dedicate hours and hours a week to learning and communicating here. And it's very unique. I don't know any other American Muslim women online who are doing that and stuff, and with such diverse content, while also under a shadow ban, right? So I greatly appreciate all the subscribe star members, and your donations are put to good use, I must say. And so let me know what you think. Until next time.